Good morning, Dan and Amy. Now, these WikiLeaks emails, John Podesta emails, the Clinton campaign chairman, also former Bill Clinton chief of staff, very close confidant, supporter, political shaman of the Clintons. These emails that disclose a lot of things: collaboration between the Clinton campaign and the D.C. press corps, collaboration between the Clinton campaign and the State Department, collaboration between the Clinton campaign and the Justice Department, the collaboration of those latter two collaborations, Justice and State, Catherine Harris yesterday called inappropriate and unprofessional.
And she'd never seen anything like this before. I mean, even she was completely shocked, you could tell.
But you see, we don't have audio or video of those things. We just have emails. We just have the written word, so it doesn't matter. Just like the Catholic bigotry exhibited by Clinton confidants and allies, it doesn't matter, right? This exchange between Sandy Newman and John Podesta, Clinton campaign chairman, Sandy Newman writing, there needs to be a Catholic spring in which Catholics themselves demand the end of a Middle Ages dictatorship and the beginning of a little democracy and respect for gender equality in the Catholic Church. Other communiques that involve Podesta talked about the bastardization of the faith by Catholics who believe in the Catechism, as opposed to the Catholics that they want, the Catholicism they want, which is Catholicism that adopts the views of the radical left. And they're getting it in certain circles, including, I would say, unfortunately, in some respects, with the Archbishop and soon-to-be Cardinal Blaise Supich of Chicago. Certainly with the president of Notre Dame, outgoing President DePaul. So, I mean, there's a lot of Catholics that are compliant. I mean, the Catholic vote very close between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama, amazingly. So
he's saying Catholicism is backwards in its view of gender relations?
Yeah, I mean, you know what they're saying.
Look at Muslims. Do you think they're have open views about gender relations?
Whoa.
If you're gay, they throw you off the roof of a building. They stone you in public.
Well, that's certainly what happens in some Islamic theocracies.
If you cheat on your husband, they'll kill you.
Yeah.
If you so look at another man. And don't even think about driving in Saudi Arabia, ladies.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine if this was about
But you can think if you're
Islamophobia?
If you're in Saudi Arabia or Yemen or Qatar, you can think about making a sizable donation to the Clinton Foundation. They'll accept that. All right. For more on this topic of Catholic bigotry and... I know nobody should care about it.
Well, I want to know how long it's been going on.
Well, this is the secular humanistic left, and it's increasingly the broad range of the political spectrum. That's the national religion, and in order to impose that as the national religion in violation of the First Amendment, you have to expunge private expressions of religion in the public square as well as in the private sphere. Wall Street Journal had an excellent editorial on the topic that they posted yesterday about the anti-Catholic Clinton camp. But it doesn't matter, right? That bigotry is okay. It's okay to be bigoted towards conservative Catholics. It's okay to marginalize them and deprive them of their rights. It's okay to go after the little sisters of the poor and say, I'm sorry, little sisters of the poor. You deserve no space for your conscience. That doesn't work in a free society. Is that still a free society? So I'm sorry, who's trying to impose which dictatorship? Mr. Newman, the Middle Ages dictatorship of the Catholic Church? Who are the authoritarians again? I'm a bit confused. Maybe Mary Fiorito can help us. Mary Fiorito joins us now. She is a former aide to Cardinal Francis George. She's the visiting fellow, the Cardinal Francis George visiting fellow position. She holds that at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. And she joins us now. Mary, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Dan and Amy.
Good morning. So Bill Donahue, the president of the Catholic League, called on John Podesta to resign or be terminated in terms of any relationship with the Clinton campaign. Well, that's probably not going to happen. But even if it did, so what? What's your response to the contents of the emails that have been disclosed by WikiLeaks in terms of their perspective on Catholicism and Catholics who believe in Catholicism?
Well, I had a couple of different reactions. Dan, my first was to think, wow, this is really sort of the Clinton camp's clinging to guns and religion moment, sort of going back to the ridiculous statements that Obama made during his own campaign. But for me, primarily, what reading these emails did was to help me to connect the dots on a couple of things that I thought were linked, but, I wasn't sure if that was my own sort of conspiracy theory mind playing into my thoughts or if it was actually true. But if you go back and look at, say the last 4 or 5 years, you're going to see a lot of links to what Halpin and Palmieri were talking about in those emails, coverage of Pope Francis's visit to the United States, and the way the media handled that Supreme Court case against the Little Sisters of the Poor that you referenced. And we know sort of behind all of this is billionaire George Soros, who has been paying different political groups on the left to help to try to influence a change not only in Catholic priorities, but in the way the media is covering Catholic priorities. So, for example, we know as a result of the WikiLeaks as well, but this would have been a few months ago, I think back in August, that Soros paid $650,000 to influence the media coverage of Pope Francis's visit to the United States. And, I know you spoke about this at the time when the Holy Father was here. 2 kind of prominent visits that he made were first to kind of a surprise visit to the Little Sisters of the Poor, very clearly showing his solidarity with them in their attempt to defend themselves against the Obama administration, and then his visit with Kim Davis, both of which, were immediately attempted to either be minimized altogether or manipulated in such a way that it made it appear that the Holy Father wasn't a supporter of religious liberty and of conscience rights.
Well, they didn't allow pictures of the Pope and Kim Davis. Remember that? It was just a meeting that they had. So you mentioned the $625,000 that George Soros spent?
Yeah, $650,000 to a group called Faith in Public Life. And then Faith in Public Life, released this report talking about how successful they were in attempting to have the Pope's message here characterized in such a way that would make it look as if his real focus was on poverty and on the environment. And, of course, that's part of the message, right? It's not like it's not something he's saying. However, he also made very strong statements about marriage and about abortion and about religious freedom. So that those were sort of muted and the others sort of elevated in such a way that kind of skewed the Pope's message. So,
well, see, that's fine. I mean, that's all Catholics have to do, and then they're fine with Podesta and the Clinton camp. Mary is. I know Pope Francis has called the redefinition of marriage anthropological regression, and I know he's pro-life. But if we just don't talk about it, or if we just concede it altogether, let's just be pro-choice. Let's just give up the church's teaching on marriage, and let's focus on climate change and the $15 minimum wage. If we just make those the main tenets of Catholicism, then we won't have any problem. So, can't the religion evolve the way that John Podesta and his friends would like it to evolve?
Well, and two, I think it's very interesting what the Democratic strategists and the Clinton campaign's response to all of this has been, which is to basically cite Pew studies showing that there are many Catholics in the United States who don't accept the church's teachings on some of our, sexual ethics or moral issues. Well, a big deal. I mean, as the Cardinal would say, Cardinal George was fond of saying, this isn't your church, isn't my church, it's Christ's church. And it's our obligation to try to follow what Christ's, teachings were to us. Newsflash, the Catholic Church is a hierarchical institution. And,
wait a second. Are you saying that Christ is more knowledgeable than John Podesta? I mean, that doesn't sound right to me.
Hey, do you think, Mary?
Commandments, not 10 suggestions.
Yeah.
Yes, Amy, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Do you think John Podesta should be fired, or should he step down, or what do you think should happen to him?
Amy, I'm not sure. I think what he had to say in those emails shows incredible contempt, not just for people who really do try to authentically live out their Catholic faith, but also for evangelicals. The sort of banter back and forth between Palmieri and Podesta about, Catholicism being the more socially acceptable religion because, their rich friends wouldn't understand if they became evangelical. I mean, to take basically all people who really do hold more conservative, if, for lack of a better word, but, that take sexual ethics, particularly around marriage and abortion. And I think that's really what the key in all of this is. It's really trying to change Catholic public opinion on abortion in particular, but marriage and contraception sort of the side issues. And, again, just the absolute contempt with which people of faith were held. I think in many other institutions or in other campaigns, there certainly would be some kind of disciplinary action or an apology forthcoming or something. How the Clinton campaign, wants to handle his particular employment issues, I'm not really equipped to comment on. But
yeah, what's fascinating about this too. What the left tries to do is say, people of faith are anti-intellectual, and people of faith and people of faith are bigots. And it turns out, of course, the bigot baiters are the bigots, and those accusing others of being anti-intellectual are the real Luddites. They're the real troglodytes. They're the real anti-intellectuals. And I would just love to get John Podesta and Palmieri and Mike Halpin and all this little cabal that thinks they're so smart because they can invoke a word like Thomism. Let's have a discussion. You bring all your people, and I'll bring Mary Fiorito and Professor George from Princeton and Professor Esselin from Providence, and we'll have a discussion about Thomas Aquinas, and we'll have a discussion about faith in a free society. You pick the topics. You pick the topics, and we'll have an intellectual discussion about it, and we'll broadcast it on every channel like we broadcast presidential debates, and let people hear the arguments and the quality of the arguments side by side.
Right. Well, and I think, too, the sort of arrogance with which he made those comments about Thomistic philosophy and subsidiarity, which would be very, important components of Catholic social teaching, as if he held some kind of doctoral degree from one of our pontifical universities. I mean, I thought,
right.
What is your background that makes you feel that you're competent to comment on these things? I found that, more than a little bit arrogant, and it reminded me of, Nancy Pelosi's staffers, maddeningly Googling, Thomas Aquinas to respond to something about abortion one time. You're just thinking, okay, on the one, because they were trying to contradict something the bishops had said. And on the one hand, you had, Nancy Pelosi staffers and Google and, and bishops who had doctoral degrees in philosophy and theology.
Yeah,
so
they thought Thomas.
It reminded me of that.
They thought Thomas Aquinas was a congressman from Alabama. Here's something else too, though. Here's why they're going to get away with this. Because if the bigotry is directed at one of their constituency groups on the left, if there was an actual case of bigotry on this order, but directed at a different target, then there's protests in the streets. It dominates the cable news networks, op-eds after op-eds. Here, Catholic bigotry, Bill Donahue said something, and we move on.
Yeah. Well, and I think, people need to start listening very carefully to the way in which not just the Clinton camp, Hillary Clinton herself is referencing people of faith, particularly Christians, evangelical Christians and Catholics. I don't know if you are familiar with the talk she gave back in April of 2015 at the Women's World Summit, where she was talking about reproductive rights. And she said, listen, in order to make this accessible to everyone and publicly funded, we need to start working on changing deeply seated religious beliefs.
Yeah, that's right.
So and so I guess, we have to go back and change the Fifth Commandment now, apparently, in order to get, Hillary Clinton what she wants. So, and she talks about, for example, freedom of worship, but she doesn't talk about freedom of religion. And that to me is a very big red flag because, Stalin allowed for freedom of worship. Freedom of religion is very, very different. People could go to church, but you couldn't be a Christian in the public square.
Yeah.
And that is a distinction.
You'll have the
very, very, yeah.
You'll have the freedom to worship the state in Clinton's 21st century America. Right. I mean, that's kind of the direction we're going. So I don't know. I guess we'll find out if people find religious liberty valuable or not on November 8th. Mary Fiorito, right. She is the Cardinal Francis George Visiting Fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Mary, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.